Good morning and welcome to those of you that are joining us for our quarterly Biz Breakfast. I'm Leonardo McClarty, President of the Howard County Chamber, and it's a pleasure to have you all with us again. Before we get started, I'll wait a few minutes just to allow all of our attendees and participants to join us before we get started with our program. So while others continue to come in, I'm going to get started with some of the preliminary things for our breakfast this morning. Certainly, I think in this COVID age, many of us now have come to understand and in some cases know we have to adjust, that we have things scheduled in the morning and sometimes stuff start taking place at home that makes it difficult for us to perhaps get online maybe when we want to. And so again, we know that others will be joining us as we continue. But again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm Leonardo McClarty, President of the Howard County Chamber. I'd like to welcome you to our quarterly Govconnects Biz Breakfast, where our topic today is building a competitive business to government marketing strategy with available market research. And so we're really excited to have with us Aaron Heffron, who's President of Market Connections. And we'll share a little bit about Aaron and his background shortly. But before we do it, and for those of you that maybe this is your first Govconnects program, I want to share a little bit about what Govconnects is, and B, this particular program in and of itself. And so Govconnects is the Chamber's business to government initiative that's now probably in its maybe 8th or 9th year of existence. We've continued to modify the formats over the years, but ultimately we have with us really about 4 or 5 core programs through this effort. The first is our Biz Breakfast, where we typically will bring in various government agencies to talk about different procurement opportunities and acquisitions and so forth, whether or not there are certain set-asides that are being planned or certain key strategic areas, ultimately with the whole goal of allowing our members and those in the Howard County business area to be able to make sound decisions as they go about responding to RFPs and seeking new business opportunities. Today is a slight twist on that, but certainly related to it, in that, you know, as we're today literally being September 30th in a new fiscal year getting ready to start, you know, everybody is now starting to think about, and actually you've been doing it before, you know, where are the next opportunities? And so certainly I think Aaron is going to help us facilitate some thoughts around that. But the other programs that you'll see, and that I'll touch on a little bit later, is our Scale Up series, which is where we talk a lot about those topics and areas of interest of those of you that are trying to continue to grow your business and that truly are trying to, as the saying says, scale up. And so we have a number of topics there that are all centered around challenges that companies in growth mode are experiencing. Our cyber conference and series comes through the Govconnects program, as is our women's leadership conference. But then we also have our C-suite dinners, which are invitation only events that we have that are deliberately and intentionally small to foster more private dialogue amongst government contracting leadership. And so that's just a little bit about Govconnects. So let's see here. I can, here we go. And so our Biz Breakfast is sponsored by Katz Abosh and Polaro Matza. And so certainly we thank them for their continued support of the Howard County Chamber. Also, we have our Govconnects annual partners, which these companies contribute over and beyond and ultimately support the entire Govconnects program. And that is Tower Federal Credit Union and Uninet. They are our top sponsors, followed by Aronson, Creatrix, Edwards Performance Solutions, HR New, Prescott HR, and Phoenix TS. And then a couple of other things I want to just reference before I introduce our speaker. Upcoming Govconnects events, in particular the October 28th, which will be about a month from now. And again, as I've referenced earlier, our Scale Up series. And so in this case, we're going to talk about employee attraction and retention and so forth. And so again, details are on the Chamber's website. This is always during the lunchtime hour on, again, the 28th. Our moderator will be Shirley Collier, who's the president of Scale to Market. And then our panelists will consist of Elena Burr, who's with Stephen Douglas, Kimberly Prescott with Prescott HR, and David Tone, who's the CEO of BTS Software Solutions and also a member of our advisory council. So again, certainly encourage you to put that on your calendars. I'm pretty sure will be another enlightening conversation. And then other events of note that we're partnering with the Economic Development Authority and the Howard County Executive's Office for a small business seminar series. This is a continuation of last year's Small Business Summit, which obviously we're doing in a virtual format this year. That starts next week on October 7th. And then also our cybersecurity risk management series, which again, we've had to modify, which is typically a one-day cybersecurity conference, which this year we've broken it up into a series of 4, which the third session and topic being on October 29th, which is ultimately going to be around developing your cyber strategic plan. And so again, these are some of the upcoming events that you can expect from the Chamber. And so with that, I am now going to get ready to have introduce our featured presenter this morning, which is Aaron Heffron. And Aaron is the president of Market Connections, and Aaron has over 20 years of experience in research and analysis in various industries and sectors, which include the federal government, trade associations, technology, television and radio, and telecommunications. Prior to joining Market Connections, Aaron worked with the NPD Group, connecting NPD's syndicated consumer data with federal, state, and local government agencies. He founded some of the first public-private partnerships with the U.S. Department of Commerce to improve economic indicators and data gathering practices. Prior to NPD, he was Senior Vice President of Public Affairs Research for Harris Interactive, where he facilitated a multi-continent strategic planning process for the Department of State, ran product trials for the Open Mobile Video Coalition, and facilitating focus groups with First Americans in Alaska and South Dakota. Again, his professional history is rooted in both the public sector, technology and telecommunications industries, again, including past positions, again, with Market Connections, the Association of Public Television Stations, trade association that represented the interests of America's 357 public television stations and independent sector, a coalition of 700 national nonprofit organizations, foundations, and corporate giving programs. He has a master's degree in public policy from Georgetown University and a BA in leadership studies and economics from the University of Richmond in Virginia. And so with that, I'm going to get ready to turn the screen over to Aaron. One thing I will also mention to each of you, if you would, if you have any questions at any moment, feel free to drop those in the Q&A function and the Q&A feature rather than in the chat. So again, if you drop those in the Q&A, we'll certainly be monitoring those. And then so with that, Aaron, the screen is yours.
Great, thank you so much, Leonardo, and I'm pleased to be here. So give me a moment to switch over and share my screen here. Let me see. So there we go. All right. Great, everybody. Well, thank you again for having me here this morning. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to talk to everybody. I was talking to my wife this morning, and I said, typically this would be a morning I'd be on the road, driving up to see you all, and shaking hands, eating Danish, drinking coffee, those sorts of things. But we do what we can, and this is the environment in which we're sharing and getting our information across in different ways. And that's kind of a little bit of the theme of this morning and the rest of the work that we've been doing at Market Connections, is to understand how that environment is changing, how it's affecting folks, and what you all, as people who are trying to work with federal agencies and state and local government agencies, what you can do to try to better connect with them, to try to develop your marketing communications plans to best reach them, and how to work together with your brethren in sales and marketing within your companies to really reach folks as effectively as you can. So with that, I want to give a little bit of background. I mean, Leonardo did a great individual introduction, and I appreciate that. But just to tell you a little bit about Market Connections itself, we are a market research company who really specializes and does a lot of work in the B2G, business to government sales and marketing area, as well as other B2B areas. I mean, we're not the folks who pick up the phone and call you during dinner and trying to understand which soft drink you like, but we are individuals who are trying to understand the decisions that people make at work, how they do it, and what they can best, what you can best do in order to connect with them. We've been doing it for 20 years. We're in the DC metro area, we're in Northern Virginia, and we really live and bleed this. And with that, I want to wish everyone a happy fiscal eve. I can't believe that we're looking at fiscal year 2021. It just seems like yesterday that we rang in the millennium and everybody was scrambling to make sure that we were getting ready for the great challenge that the end of 1999 into 2000 we're going to bring each other. And the computer shutdowns and planes falling out of the sky and Y2K that was going on with that. I can't believe so much has happened over the last 20 years in that, and those are the types of things that we're continuing to track and focus on what we're doing. So what I want to cover today and talk about today is I really want to do this in 3 sections. One is talk a little bit about the current external factors that are affecting the federal environment. And I can say I haven't even begun to integrate the information coming out of last night's, I guess we call it a debate, but that is that's another piece. But I will talk about some of those other factors that are affecting the federal workforce right now and the decisions that they're making and how they're making them. I want to talk a little bit about the best practices as far as blending and working together between your marketing arm and your business development arm. Now, in your company, that may be one and the same person. That may be the left hand and the right hand. So some of those points may be less relevant to you, but there are issues and points to think about what you can do as you go along. And then last is to give you some kind of a little bit of information about some certain pathways and tools that you can use to connect to what is really a unique customer base. Speaking with Leonardo a little bit beforehand in this, is that the federal government dominates this area both financially and in just the air we breathe. You can't do anything, whether you are a direct to sell government type of contractor, or you even work tangentially in supporting those kind of companies. The largest companies that work with the federal government end up working very similar in their mannerisms and efforts to a federal agency. So many of these types of examples that I'm bringing are going to be portable across a lot of different areas. So with that, I'd love to start off with a little bit of, humor here. I'd say, we're always very focused on making sure that you have information that can support your ideas. Uh, so many people we talk to rely on the anecdotal information. They rely on a couple conversations they've had here or there, and really have that recency bias of the last client I spoke with or the last customer I spoke with. I mean, how many times have you heard that from sales folks and others saying, well, I just spoke to Jane in this agency or in this company, and this is what they're really, the problem is. That's the direction we should go. We're all affected by that in one way or another. And I like to say that, you need to put together a lot of those anecdotes into one place and really sift through them. Because once you have 4 or 5 or more anecdotes, you start getting actual data. And that's what we deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Hey, Aaron, I'm going to pause you for just a second.
Sure.
Note from your team, it looks like you're on slide 7 instead of the first slide.
Oh, well, let's see. I've been advancing, and as we go along, I apologize for that. Let me stop sharing for a moment and reshare here. Is that better?
Yep, that looks better. I see 2020, a unique.
There we go. Okay, sorry about that. But thank you. So 2020 has certainly been a unique year. And I think that's probably the understatement of the year. There are so many different factors that I could get into right now, and I just recently did another presentation that kind of talked a lot about these different things that are going on right now. But I want to focus in on 2 of them, otherwise we could spend all day on this. One is COVID. That has certainly changed the way we all work, and I think that's not a surprise to anybody. You've heard that already. Everybody's pivoted to telework. Everybody's had to set up these kind of secure networks for teleworking. We've had to take additional health precautions, and different employers thinking about different ways that their employees can either work from home or come into the office, split shifts, different rules that they have. And a lot of the funding that was dispersed a little bit earlier in the year certainly affected that as well, for the kind of small and medium businesses alike along that way. Definitely a shock to the system as we're going. And I think honestly trying to really pushing along some innovation, to look at the glass half full side of this, some innovation in the way we all work, accelerating it, that maybe 3 to 4 years from now we would have been in this more virtual discussion environment, and this kind of hastened and pushed a lot of that along and moved things along in a way that may have eventually come that way to begin with. The other major factor of focusing this year are the elections, and I think those elections have impacts on current efforts. A lot of the uncertainty, and we'll talk about that in a second, and everything from transition planning to budget approvals, all of those have effects. So let's take a look at some of that. I have a little bit of data I want to show from recent surveys that we did with the government agencies along the way. So the immediate effects from COVID, we did a survey of federal agencies, of those individuals who work in them in both defense and civilian agencies. And we found that, we did this first survey back in April, May. We repeated it again in July to see how the evolution was going in it all. And what we've seen is, that we still have a overwhelming amount of the staff that are working remotely full-time. Some folks have started to creep back into the office in that day or two in. where they come in, maybe splitting time with other staff members along the way. But you're seeing a lot of the execution of new projects being slowed down, that they're just not, things, contracting and other things are just moving a little more slowly, and morale is terrible. Everybody, as we all are, stressed. We're getting to we're at the end of the fiscal year now, but at the time of the survey, we were just getting into that last quarter, and everybody was really trying to push to get things done and weren't quite sure how that was going to go about. Good news for many of you is that a good number of the federal and government agencies were saying they're going to lean on their vendors and contractors a little more, that they were going to reach out to them and ask for that assistance. And in doing so, they found that the vendors were really doing, and you all were doing a really good job of supporting them, of stepping up, of providing that assistance to them. But they're also looking now for more of those kind of longer term solutions. They're looking for consultative advice, saying, okay, things are going to change. We were in survival mode for the first couple months, but now we're in planning mode. And what can you as a vendor or contractor do to really assist them in that planning mode going forward is what is where they are and their heads are right now. Roll up your sleeves with us and work with us. The other area that is causing some uncertainty right now is the election, and take away the decision about who will be in the White House come the beginning of 2021 at this point, and focus more on what's happening right now, the month and a half that we have leading up, or I guess about a month now of leading up to the election, and the couple months that follow. What we're finding is that even right now, it's causing angst and more difficulty for these folks to do their jobs. There's lots of uncertainty, water cooler, quote unquote, water cooler conversations back and forth. What's going to happen? Who's going to be running this administration? And even the political appointees that usually oversee the agencies themselves. In a presidential year, there's transition regardless of who wins. So there's a lot of uncertainty about what's happening next. And as a result, we have a lot of the agencies that have just slowed things down. They're not launching new. They've got old efforts on pause as well, but the new efforts are the ones that are really causing concern right now and not moving forward in a way that they would want to.
Hey, Aaron, I'm going to interrupt you 1 second. We've got a question here. And so, Gloria, I'm going to allow you to talk. So feel free to ask your question. Gloria Larkin, you had a question?
Hi. No, I did not have a question. I'm enjoying the content. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Your hand was raised, or at least let me lower your hand then.
I apologize.
Okay. All right. Well, Aaron, continue moving forward.
Gloria got put on the spot there and she wasn't ready for it. All right. He's just checking in to see who's paying attention along the way. It's like a good facilitator here. So the other part that's important to everybody that's probably on this phone is the agency budgets. Now about, I guess it was last week, about this time, they announced a continuing resolution through the second week of December to keep the government funded and keep things moving forward. One of the things that we did ask in our survey back in July was when they anticipated having a federal budget. And having the federal budget is usually the indicator of whether they can start new spending at this particular point. Continuing resolutions allow current projects often to continue to some extent, and what many of us are interested in is the launch of new projects or new contracts. So you see that most folks, especially in the civilian area, don't anticipate seeing a budget until new Congress is in place. And that's not atypical now for kind of recent history, I don't think in 20 some years that, you know, in a presidential year, we've had a budget on time. You know, it's been pretty much the norm to wait until the new Congress is in place at this point, for better or for worse. One thing you will see is defense. Those folks who are working in the DoD expect their budget a little bit sooner. That's not unexpected either. Usually the DoD budget gets passed first. There's usually a little more bipartisan support for getting that passed and getting that moving forward before you move on to the civilian agencies. So with that, before I move on to talk a little bit about, you know, structuring yourselves to take advantage of this situation, you know, I'll kind of open up if there's any questions to follow up on that. All right. Well, with that, I'll just keep on trucking. So what we have found over time in working with contractors, both large and small, is that there are certain structures that they have in place that allow both marketing and sales to work together and kind of achieve some best practices as far as winning. And about a year or two ago, we really focused on this relationship between the sales and marketing teams to best understand expectations for each and the extent that, you know, each is or is not working together, and then overlaid those structures with win rates. You know, what structure really leads to the best chance of winning a recompete or winning a new contract along the way. So what we first looked at was the structure of the BD and marketing departments themselves. And in the federal contracting community, and this is where we're primarily focused here, is that oftentimes we see that the BD and marketing are reporting, about half the time they're reporting to different groups. They line up, and sales reports up into a sales leader, marketing reports up into a marketing lead. However, there is about half the time where it's muddled, where marketing may report up into sales, and we see that quite a bit. There's a better chance that you're going to see marketing report up into the head of business development than the other way around. And that's natural. The growth of a company usually puts a head of sales and BD first in their build out and expansion, and then has somebody who's working on communications and marketing report up into that person to support them. That's usually what we see. But what we did find, though, is that when they report into separate folks, they have a higher win rate. And this is a lot spoken to the motivations and what really moves and motivates a business development focused and sales focused person versus a marketing focused person. And I am by no means disparaging either one of those lines. They each have their particular role. But you know, the joke in marketing is you don't spell marketing S-A-L-E-S, is that there's different reasons for doing those different things, and the end goal is a little bit different. So we found that letting the salespeople sell and letting the marketing people market has the effect of improving the chance that there's, you know, that they win new pursuits that are coming along, because the marketing people can think either longer term, think bigger picture. Salespeople can focus on the day-to-day conversions of sales from point to point.
And so, Aaron, that's a good segue here on that. And this is a question from the Q&A, and that is, do you think the DoD DFAR shift with CMMC will have a major impact on the market?
You know, it's interesting. I think that there will be impacts, and I think everything is going to happen around the edges at this point. I think there is too much uncertainty for big shifts to happen, and I think we're going to see that everything kind of starts with smaller entities. So if you're dealing with a lot of smaller acquisitions or new things, that's where those changes are going to hit first before they move into any sort of larger procurements or larger structural changes. You're going to see those changes happen around the edges. First, those smaller procurements, some new things happening, but it's really hard now with the way funding is being scrutinized and accountability and such. Everybody's looking for new ways to try to get things done. And I think you're going to see a lot of this experimentation happen over the next year as things get kind of settled into something new. So to continue, the other thing we see is that it's very interesting to see how little or how much the BD and marketing teams actually work together. And we kind of took that indicator of working together as actually having joint meetings. We see that a majority of the folks have those either weekly or monthly meetings together where you come together, talk about what their goals are, align sales with marketing and marketing with sales of what's going on, aware of new opportunities, aware of new campaigns, what are you trying to accomplish. But what's interesting is that there is nearly 1 out of 5 down there that meet only yearly or really not at all. And that's really a problematic. In smaller companies, we see that's usually not a problem. Usually those folks are working hand in glove. You get into some of these larger companies that we've also worked with, and the silos are incredible, and they're almost competing in their way, competing for resources, competing for the attention of executives, and seem to be in conflict with each other in some cases. The other area we see collaboration happening is working in the RFPs. And the best companies who have the highest win rates really work the sales and marketing teams together in developing their plans for RFPs, sitting down ahead of time, saying, how well does this RFP align with the company's values, working together to arrange, the teaming partners, and developing specific campaigns around specific RFPs. And we historically have seen the best companies are ones that, these RFPs are multi-year, are hugely significant to your business. Developing those marketing campaigns around those specific RFPs is crucial to making things work as you go along. And then in the end, also tweaking them as you go, because dynamics change. Folks who are involved change, the environment changes. There's different ways that you have to go about it. We have companies that we work with right now that started pursuing RFPs and doing marketing campaigns, at the end of 2019. And as they came into 2020, had to make massive pivots in the way that they communicate with individuals, going into the second quarter of this year. And that was really a collaboration between the marketing and salespeople to make that work. And we see that those folks who do work together early in the process have higher win rates. If they're anticipating, if the marketing and sales team get together and work on anticipating these new RFPs, anticipating the needs, and develop marketing plans and content around those particular needs early on in the process, they have much higher win rates than those who maybe wait till the RFP is dropped or go on. And everybody intuitively knows this, that yes, we should work together, and we could combine our energies, combine our intelligence, and make it, make something better. But really seeing it down on paper is that if you work early enough and start that collaboration early, you increase your win rate significantly. So with that, I'll pause for a second. I'm going to move into an area that focuses much more on the how. What are some of those channels? What are some of the ways to best reach individuals and deliver? Any questions on that structural issue first before I move on? All right. So, we all enjoy looking at charts and graphs, and I'll often say that, you can make the numbers look the way you want, and many of us have done this, where you'll stand up, you'll see someone, you're sitting there in a meeting and see someone stand up and say, hey, look how great we're doing. And you say, well, they missed the environment entirely. I mean, something like Google, being great on Google Plus right now, well, that's great. Look how much you grew into 2019. Well, it's pretty much no longer around. But that would be great if you showed some trend up in the last 3 years. But really knowing where you should be and tracking that is the best way to keep things going. So let's talk for a moment about where people's eyeballs are. We all want to reach individuals. We want to reach these folks who work on a day-to-day basis. And one thing I want to note is that federal workers and those who are making decisions in the public sector community are people too. I have that mantra, and it sounds so, simplified, but so many of our clients try to overcomplicate, in many cases, the ways and pathways into these federal communities. Oh, I need to make sure that I can get into secure environments and stuff can be delivered into SCIFs along the way. Well, back up for a second. These folks are doing many of the same, have many of the same habits as the general population. And actually, if we look at it, some of the things they're doing provide access to them, to their minds, to their eyes, to their ears, in a much higher fashion than many of these other ways. So you'll see that half the time during the workday, they're spending a good bit of time looking online for news content. They're watching TV or other news programs. They're listening to the radio. Now, I will note that this is data from 2019. In a month from yesterday, we will be releasing the data for 2020. And it'll be interesting to see how this has changed based on people's commuting habits or lack thereof, where they're working, how they're working as we go. But with this, you'll see that there's still a great amount of consumption of news and information during the workday, providing you all a channel to be able to get to those individuals in some fashion. They are going to digital sites for many of these top publications, and many of them or you personally look at along the same way: Government Executive, Federal Times, Politico. These are the mainstays that the government community goes for their information. It influences the way they think about things and the priorities that they're putting. But they also have all these general sites that they go to. And we always laugh that weather ends up being the top. And I'm not saying that everybody should take and try to do some sort of targeted advertising on weather apps and weather.com, because God help us, the amount of advertising that on weather.com right now makes it almost difficult to see the weather. So I'm not saying that that's the best way, but there's a reason there's all that advertising on there, is because that's where the eyeballs are. That's where people go multiple times a day to see what's going on. They also use social media. And we laugh and we think, oh, these federal workers, they're all 55 and over, which is true. That, they skew significantly older than the general population. But they still use a lot of social media, and it continues to grow. You see the use of things like Facebook. You see the use of LinkedIn going up, and even Instagram and Twitter. I mean, we're starting to see, and in the last 2 years, we've seen the largest wave of retirements going. So there has been some, and I have a tough time figuring out the word from younging of the federal audience. On average, they're getting a little bit younger because of these retirements. And you're seeing some of the increased pickup in social media. It's a pathway. It's a way to connect to individuals as you go. I'm not saying that you should, connect on Instagram with your customers, But I'm saying that they do go online and see that. And there is a blurring between your private social media, or quote unquote private, and the social media you use for work. I mean, how many of you now are starting to see work-related ads on your Facebook feeds? I know I do. I wish I didn't, but I do. So you see that along the way, that blending across the environments, and they're using them a lot. The effectiveness of these channels, and one thing we wanted to best understand in surveying these folks is to understand what's the best way for a contractor to get content about what they do, their services, their products, to folks. What's the best way? What's the way that individuals sitting in government agencies are seeking this information and feel that it's an effective way to get news and quality information about what's going on out there? You know, search engines is still top. I mean, you got to make sure that your services and products are search engine optimized. That's never going to go away at this point. It's too ingrained in everybody's mindsets. But we also found that the kind of government-related communities and websites that you see online, you know, they really lean on those to understand what's going on. Communications often within the agencies themselves is not great, let alone across agencies. So they look to those specific trade press to understand what's going on out there, and likewise see about new technologies, new products, new services that may be available to them. The bottom three in effectiveness in delivering real content, you'll see are, you know, the bottom two are really those social media that I talked about. I'm not saying that it's not that, you know, that you should not use or leverage the social media at all. I'm just saying there's a particular reason why you would use social media. This focus was on delivering content, information about what you do and how you do it. If you are just trying to raise awareness that you actually exist, to raise the thought in their mind of, hey, this company, I should look them up. I haven't heard about them before. That's where the broad footprint and broad reach of a Facebook or a Twitter or a LinkedIn can be effective in reaching those individuals. Awareness building as opposed to familiarity building. What's interesting, though, is that we see the comparison between federal public sector agencies and state and local. And I know many of you probably work with local, state, and locality agencies, have contracts with them. Our research has shown that this audience is, one, a little bit younger, and two, information deprived. The state and local government officers don't get the same love the federal agencies do. And you know, their footprints are a little smaller, their budgets are a little smaller, and they're more dispersed all around the country. So the more information you can give them and provide to them, they're going to lap that information up. They're looking for any sort of content information to help them do their jobs. They're often a shop of one, maybe two people. So that, you know, that person is chief cook and bottle washer all at once. You know, they're trying to gather all the information they can and make a final decision and recommendation at the same time. So they're hungry for information. So the more you can provide to them, the better. The kind of information that they really crave is that information intense and formats that are really rich in information and specifications about what this does, how it works, how it could help them. I mean, look at the research reports and the white papers. You know, those are the things that these individuals are craving and saying, you know, tell me how this works. Tell me how this is going to affect it. And especially in the state and local environment, as I mentioned, many of these folks are single person shops. They're lone wolves within their agencies. They have to communicate and work with non-technical people or folks that may not be as entrenched in their topic areas as much as they are. So they need that more plain language discussion. So if you look at things like marketing collateral, I mean, who would say that marketing collateral is a great content format? I mean, these one-pagers, well, the one-pagers are effective for those agencies where they have to communicate about how this is going to help them. They need a succinct way to do it. So giving them that bit of content tailored in a way that everybody can understand is helpful, that they can just cut and paste and use to take to their bosses and say, here's the reason why we need to move forward with X, Y, or Z. Within that content that you create, whether it's a white paper, whether it's marketing collateral or whatnot, the key things to make sure that you include is that data and research to support it. I mean, give them some hard facts, give them 3 good nuggets of information that will support their case. Give them the specifications of that particular product or service, you know, the technical details, have that included. They may not pass that along, but they'll use it themselves. And then the examples of past performance are really helpful to make sure that they're not going out on a limb with a company that's never done this before. Less important to them is the bells and whistles, you know, making this visually appealing. Now, I'm not saying giving them a dense piece of paper that has the specifications in, you know, death by PowerPoint or bullet points, but you know, not spending a lot of time on animated presentations that, you know, do X, Y, or Z. You know, get to the point, make it visually attractive, but make it content rich. You know, and really get that information out there to them and tailor it to their particular agencies. One of the, you know, later points I want to make is, and the question that we always get is, okay, we have all these different ways, but we have white papers, people are doing video blogs now, we're doing case studies. How long should I actually make these? Is the attention of the individual really there to make it so that I can, you know, that they're going to actually consume it? If I put together a 10-page white paper, is anyone going to read it? Or am I just wasting my time? And what's interesting is we do see some difference if you are doing marketing to federal agencies versus state and local agencies. But the contrast I want to point in these two is a little more generational. Federal employees tend to be a little older. State and local employees tend to be about 7 to 10 years younger on average than the federal employees. About a generation difference. I mean, you think about those folks that are 10 years younger than you, they work, and how they work is a little bit different. And what we saw is that the type of information and the amount of time they're willing to spend with information is a little different. The older workers or the federal workers, you'll see that they start on the clock if you deliver content. You know, 5-10 minutes, they'll read a blog post, they'll watch a 5 to 10 minute video, even a podcast that they might listen to up to 10 minutes. When you hit the white papers, it'll be about 15 minutes. You start to lose about half of your audience if it's takes them longer than 15 minutes to read, or if it's longer than a 10-minute podcast. Then as you go longer, you start getting to case studies. They'll spend more time reading their case studies, 20, 25 minutes they'll spend on that. And maybe even an ebook, something that's a little more visually attractive, but a little more in depth. They'll spend even more time. And then webinars like this, I think there's a general acceptance that the 45-minute window is about perfect for folks with the webinar as they go along. But what's interesting is that when you flip to the younger audience on the right-hand side, the blogs are still there, keep them short, but everything within that first piece is about reading. Blogs, case studies, white papers, anything they need to read for the most part is you're keeping it to 15 minutes or less. What they're willing to do, though, is watch or listen to things that are longer. Different learning styles, how they grew up. You know, we hear from some of our clients the most popular videos that they have are engineers or technical people sitting in front of a whiteboard with an iPhone, sketching things out on a whiteboard and describing something. That they say they've had folks sit for 45 minutes to an hour listening to a man or a woman draw on a whiteboard behind them. And their clients watch that because they're hungry for that kind of information. But it's a certain type of person that's going to do that. I think you see that some of that younger audience is willing to and wanting to watch longer rather than read longer. And I think that's just I think some of that speaks to the generational difference about how they grew up and what they're used to looking at or watching.
So Aaron, we have a quick question here for you.
Sure.
And this is, how do you feel about repurposing research papers from credible sources rather than creating new content? Is it better to be first or to be an expert?
I think repurposing other sources is a great way to build credibility. We have found, and we're seeing that again this year, that the trust that individuals have in what the contractors or businesses say they can do, or say that they, or the problems that they say are problems right now, that trust in them is they don't believe them as much as they used to. It used to be that they'd come to the contracting community and say, help guide the way. Now they're a little more skeptical of the promises they're getting. So individuals, so if you can pull in some of those outside sources, those other research reports, integrate those in and use those to comment on why you're there, and why what you are trying to address is a problem and why your solution is the best of those scenarios. To the point of being first, the public sector community is incredibly risk averse. They're not risk takers. They don't want to be on the bleeding edge of new solutions. They want to try, they want something that's tried and true. They want something that they're going to have to work in. I mean, many of these people are going to be in their jobs for decades, not weeks or years, decades. So their reputations and the longevity that they have there invest them in making sure that what they do, isn't going to crash and burn in a couple of years. They want to make sure that something is working. So if you can, you don't have to be first to the table, but if you can come with credible sources, demonstrate that this works, and show examples of how it's been used other places, that's what's going to give them the reassurance to move forward. The other area that I know is of interest to many of you that are on this call is, all right, I've got a pipeline. What do I do with it? How do I move people along in it? I've got them in. The top of my funnel looks great. I've got a lot of opportunities in there. I want to move them along. What's the types of marketing that I can do to help move them along? I mean, this is a slow process. I mean, we talk about contracts that take 120, 180 days to award. There's a lot of marketing that has to happen or can happen during that 4 to 6 month time period while things are being considered. So what are some of the things that we can do to move things along in the process? And we asked folks about what's the most effective types of marketing that can help. And to the point that was talked about earlier, you see the things that are on top there about the account specific data and the competitive intelligence being toward the top of that list. That's where that outside research that the question was from comes into play. Feeding that sort of information. I mean, you've made the best case for you as a company and your solution. What you now can feed is additional information that comes from outside sources, that comes from trusted sources, other research firms that come in and provide that sort of information and additional assistance in supporting your cases. You'll see that many of these things are information based. I see event marketing on there, and we can talk about that. That's going to be a challenge, and there's my understatement of the day, for the next 6 months to a year as to what can be done from an event marketing standpoint. And I'm happy to talk about that in more detail. Pipeline marketing, a little bit different than the overall marketing, and you see kind of the bottom of the list of effectiveness are, outdoor advertising, print, radio, TV. And again, I come back to, it's not that you shouldn't be doing those, it's picking the time and place for those. RFP is already out there, things are going, it's not the time to throw up a billboard next to the agency and saying how wonderful you are. That isn't necessarily going to be as effective. Now, that's going to be effective if you want to raise the awareness of a particular agency, that you have solutions, or you as a company are focusing and exist to help them raise awareness along the way. But as far as actually moving specific opportunities through, that's not the way to go. Though it's appealing, and it's high splash, not necessarily going to have the same effect that you're looking for. So I want to talk about events and that event marketing, and I want to wrap up with this, because I think that a lot of you on this phone spend a lot of time attending, or did spend a lot of time attending events, whether they're in-person events or webinars. Events are going to be a challenge, and events were a lifeblood of the federal market for sales and marketing purposes. And what we saw is that there was a lot of attendance of events, leading up to this. People were looking in years, they'd attend 4 to 5 events a year. It was, without question, one of the ways to get face-to-face with people. March, April hit, and that number dropped off a cliff. You do see a couple people attend events, and we were talking about this yesterday as a staff. Who is that 5% that has attended 4 more events since March? And many of those were probably events that were at the beginning of March. We also need to think about that there's a big difference between what's happening in the DC area and what happens out in the nation. I mean, this is nationwide type of information from a federal community standpoint. So there were still a lot of other meetings and discussions going on since then at the time. But generally, there's no in-person events at this point. So when is that going to happen again? And I can't say I have particularly good news in that, because we asked folks of when will they start feeling comfortable or consider attending events again. And we said, there's difference in types of events. There's these small events where it may be a breakfast where you have less than 50 people in a room together having this. And then you have the large, maybe more trade show type of events on the other end of the spectrum. What we see is that there was a little bit of appetite to get back to these under 50 events. But for the most part, that's going to be not until the new year. You're going to see January and after is when you'll start getting close to half of the people saying I'm willing to attend the smallest of events again, starting in January. And I think that's going to be a question by locality as well. As the events get larger, the concern about them starts to go, and you look at 40% or more saying that it's going to be April or later until they're willing to attend a large conference or event again. What's the most troubling or concerning information there is if you look at large events, the percentage of people, 1 out of 5, saying that they're unlikely to ever attend a large event again. That's a pretty big number considering how integral these events were to the overall sales and marketing plans of many companies. Think of booths that you have set up at different events, vendor expos, whatnot. So, you have a large event, but you still have a lot of people who just don't know. You've got, around a quarter of the people saying, you know what, I just don't know. And I think it's really going to depend on what's the event like, how important it is. I think folks are assessing right now, as we all are, what's the value of attending these events? What do I get out of it? And can I just get that from the comfort and security of my own office or my own home at that particular point without exposing myself to more risk? It's a big question. We're going to continue to track this because this is an important piece of many people's budgets as they're going forward.
So Aaron, quick question for you, and this gets back to the events. And so could you talk a little bit about just the proliferation of federal virtual events that seemingly are happening every week, versus, say these national conferences, as well as even industry days? Does your research touch on those things as well?
We do, and we've asked folks about virtual events and webinars and such. Webinars were always an integral part of the way to get to folks. We would find that about a third to a half of individuals used to attend maybe 2 or 3 webinars a year. That was comfortable, they'd sit and watch it. Since March, that number spiked. I mean, we're up to 3/4, 8 out of 10 or more folks attending some of these webinars and virtual events along the way. I think we're going to see a little bit of a shakeout of that over the next 3 to 4 months. We've already seen a change and an evolution in the style and format of those. We're going to see folks experimenting with that. But the key difference in these webinars is that versus the events themselves is that the webinars historically have been a way to communicate information, the way to talk about a problem and present a solution. What they can't replace is the side conversations and networking that happens at the in-person events. And I think you're seeing some people try to experiment with the networking side, like how do you virtually network? We've all sat on Zoom calls that are oddly uncomfortable as folks talk over each other and try to have conversations, but it doesn't really work well along the way. I think there's some experimentation of how that's going to happen, but I think that the format of the webinar is here to stay. Folks are much more comfortable doing video and watching video on than they ever were before. I think it accelerated the adoption of video usage by a year or two in what people were comfortable with. But it's understanding what the purpose of those are, is that they are primarily an information sharing tool at this point, and you can't expect them to be much more than that at this particular point. I would say keeping the length of them to that 45 minutes or less is continuing to be key. I know some places have done virtual events that are 3 hours long, and good grief, I couldn't imagine. It's bad enough thinking about my kids being online for 5-6 hours a day. I definitely don't want to do it. But that's the sort of thing that there's a lot of experimentation right now, but I think it's starting to settle in and it's not going away. It's going to be interesting to see whether that replaces or just supplements the live events going forward. I think this year is a big experiment. It's going to be interesting going into the beginning of next year, what part of this all sticks versus what all kind of recedes back into the background. So, that kind of, wraps up what, I wanted to cover today, and as I said, as I've, often said, anything, people can put a PowerPoint together and, people will believe it. If you spend enough time to make a pie chart, that's very, it's going to prove your point one way or another. So that's why I like to try to talk through this, the questions. I'm happy to answer additional questions as we go along and get into some of the background and stories behind the numbers. I think that's where it's most useful, or talk about what you can do along the way. We provide a bunch of other sources of information, and I encourage everybody to go take a look when they have a chance. I mentioned that we'll be talking a lot more about the type of media usage that folks, and this year really focusing on those folks that are working remotely versus those that are still going to the office, how that evolution has changed. We've got a lot of content talking about that available, the effects of COVID on contracting and such, the elections. You know, we've got a lot of the different information. If you're in this realm, I would encourage folks to come and take a look at what's going on. And as I mentioned, we'll release this more information here at the end of this month. So you can go on registering. It's an on-demand download. We usually have a nice breakfast, guest speakers and whatnot. This year, it's going to be a video drop like many of the others that you see around the way. So with that, you know, questions, other thoughts that folks may have, I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Well, excellent. Thank you, Aaron. And so again, while we have you, for those, if there are any questions, certainly feel free to ask those currently. I guess maybe Aaron, one question I have for you, and that is, for those that may end up wanting to see it, is this PowerPoint something that you're able to share? Or
sure.
Would you?
Sure, I'm happy to pass it along. I'll have it sent along to you.
Okay.
But, if you want to distribute it out to those attendees, I'm happy to share that.
Okay, excellent. So I will make sure that for those of you that are participating today, that we send this out as a follow-up. Also, I guess since there are no other questions, I do want to just share with you just a couple of things. Once again, that we just touched on a little bit earlier, and that is, again, just a few of the upcoming events that we have of note. And again, starting with the Small Business Summit that's starting next week, as well as the cybersecurity workshop, and then also our Scale Up series, which will be on the 28th. I also think I saw a question that did perhaps come through that I'll note in just a second. Again, I want to just acknowledge and thank our annual partners in Tower Federal Credit Union and Uninet, who are our lead Govconnects annual partners, as followed by Aronson, and then the others that you see noted as well. And then also want to thank our Bizbreakfast sponsors in Katz Abosch and Calera Matza. And so again, thank them for, again, their support of the Chamber this year. And so let's see here if I could get back to the screen here. Also, I think we did have one question that came up. And this question was, who do you survey, job titles, positions, et cetera, and how do you conduct your surveys?
Sure, it's a good question. And we survey out the federal audience, and these are folks that are influence the buying process. So they're folks that develop specifications, they develop the RFPs, they identify the needs and challenges, but we also include in those individuals who are part of the decision-making process. And this may be part of the decision-making process for technology, IT solutions. It may also be the folks who are, any sort of professional services, office supplies, furniture. It's the full realm of individuals who are making decisions across all both defense and civilian agencies. So some of them are the final decision makers, where they're the ones that sign on the bottom line. Others are the ones that sit on those selection committees or down select committees that make those particular decisions along the way. We maintain a internal panel of thousands of public sector decision makers and influencers. Over the last 10 years, we've built up this database of individuals who will, thousands of individuals who will answer these types of questions. And they range, we'll ask them questions anywhere from how aware are you of certain types of companies? What do you think of different companies? And then what's the odds that you would choose particular companies? That side of the fence, as well as questions about what are your priorities, challenges, and issues right now.
Just noticed I was on mute. So any other questions we have for Aaron before we wrap up here? So, and looks like I think I guess we're good. So I guess we're going to give you back 20 minutes of your time. I think we may have originally said 8:30 to 10, but it's 9:41. And so you get 19 minutes back of your day. And so maybe that means, you can help the kids or listen in on another assignment or take the dogs for a walk. And so, but Aaron, thank you for joining us this morning and sharing those insights. I think that our participants certainly got a great deal of positive information. I'll certainly make sure we share the PowerPoint, especially I think the links that you provided. I think certainly as we continue to see and hear, content is king right now. And so again, thank you for joining us, and thank you all for continuing to support the Howard County Chamber and our Govconnects program. Hope you have a great rest of your day.